So in this video, we're now going to start Android Studio and configure it and make sure that we're set up to use Git. So what I'm going to do first is start Android Studio. So I can actually start it from up here. If you've recently installed Android Studio, you should see that option there. Alternatively, under A, there's Android Studio. I'm going to click into that and we can select Android Studio from there. All right, so I'll wait for that to load up. Now once it's loaded, we want to go in down here to configure, then we want to click on settings. And if you're on a Mac, you'll probably see that the settings will say preferences, but it's the same option. And if you happen to have had a project open already, close down the project so you get back to this welcome screen. So I'm going to click on settings. That brings up this settings screen, and you want to make sure that under version control, you click on version control or expand the list of options by clicking on this little arrow. That'll open, and then come down here and select Git. And what this should show automatically, irrespective of the operating system you're using, is the path to the Git executable. And that is a prerequisite, by the way, to make sure that Git has been installed on your computer prior to this. But you've obviously done that if you've been following along in this section of the course. So we can see that the path has been added for us automatically. So Android Studio has found Git for us. And you want to make sure here that under SSH executable, the built-in option is selected, and that is the default anyway. And what we can also do here is we can test to make sure that Git is working okay by coming over here and clicking on test. So let's do that now. And if you get a message similar to what you can see on the screen there, that Git executed successfully, and that it shows you a version number, that in my case is 2.10.1.0, but which may be a different number for your computer, then you know that everything's working just fine. Now, if for some reason you are having troubles with Git and you can't find it and the test perhaps failed, you can come over here and click on the ellipse. Then you can navigate to the folder where Git was installed on your system and select the executable file and get it working that way. In my case, the test worked, so I don't need to do anything else. All right, so that's step one. The second thing we want to do now is configure our GitHub account. So I want to click on, well, before I move to another option, if you did change something, make sure you click on apply to save those changes. But in my case, I didn't change anything, so I'm going to click on GitHub. And now what we need to do is enter our details again, as I mentioned, so that we can connect to GitHub. So over here, make sure under auth type that password is selected. Host, we're going to leave as github.com. Login will be the username that you assigned when you created your GitHub account. In my case, it was Tim-Bachauka. So I'm going to enter my password. Leave everything else there as default. And then we can click on test to make sure that we've entered our credentials correctly. And that's telling me that I haven't entered the credentials correctly, so I'll just try again. So obviously, if you get that error, make sure your username and password is correct. We'll try again. And obviously, I've got it right this time because it said connection successful. So I'm going to click on OK to accept that message. I'm going to click on Apply to save the change. And at this point, it's asking for a master password. Now, if this is the first time you've set up a password in Android Studio, you may be prompted for this, as I've been here. Now, this is a password to access all passwords in IntelliJ. So it's got nothing to do with Git or GitHub as such. And what you can do is you can specify a new password. It's sort of like a master password to give you access to the other passwords that you set up. And GitHub is one example of a password. And alternatively, you can leave it blank. So I'm going to leave mine blank. And just a note here, if you're on Windows, you can also encrypt this with the user, the operating system user credentials. But in my case, I'm going to leave it empty and not assign a master password and just click on OK. All right, then I can click on OK. And at this point, we've now done the basic configuration steps to make sure that Git's working with Android Studio, and we've also associated GitHub with Android Studio. So let's now move on to the next video.